Hello everyone, it's Erin LaFave here, plant priestess and herbalist from Full Circle Herbals. So we are wrapping up the 28-day plant priestess exploration, and I'm coming on to do a impromptu lesson on a nettle. I hadn't planned on this, although I knew I wanted to come on and give you a nettle lesson. So nettle is Urticia dioica, or something along those lines. Urticia dioica, that's the Latin name of it. And here we call them stinging nettles. There are many different kinds of nettles, but the stinging nettles that we have a good sting to them. And they also grow more so in full sun. We have another type of nettles around here that I call wood nettles. And they typically grow right in the woods in kind of shaded areas. They have their leaf is a little bit more round, whereas stinging nettle has a very narrow leaf, a very narrow leaf like this. Wood nettle leaves are much more rounded. So what is stinging nettle good for? Well, stinging nettle I call a nutritive because it's an herb. It's a plant, it's an herb. It's a plant that can be eaten as a wild edible. And it's an herb because it has medicinal qualities to it. So the best time I think to pick nettles is in the spring. And some of the research that's done on the nutritional profile of nettle shows that more nutrients are available in the spring growing parts of the plant, and if you harvest it towards the end of the season, there's less nutrients in it. Although they still have quite a bit of nutrients in there, it's just still more readily, there's more in the spring harvest. So you would still get a good dose of all the different kinds of vitamins and minerals that nettle has. Like they have good amount of iron and calcium available in it, and it's actually comparable to spinach. So nettle can be actually more nutritive in some ways than spinach is, and when it's used cooked or dried. So nettle loses that sting to it when it's cooked or dried. So I'm looking at nutritional facts right now, and when it's cooked, when it's blanched, it actually has 46% of your daily calcium needed and 10% of iron needed. So yeah, it's got dietary fiber in it, protein. It's actually got a high amount of protein in it. So protein, calcium, iron, and other amino acids are in there. And also there is lots of vitamin A. There's actually omega-3s in there too, quite a bit. Is about the same as spinach, or even more in some instances. But the numbers seem to be higher in the spring cuttings than in the fall cuttings. Now, I do both. I typically harvest for edibles in the spring because that little green top that just first pops through the soil is very... it's very supple. It's full of lots of water content. It's soft, it's pliable, and it usually doesn't have quite as much of the stingy hairs left to it because they're very soft. As it gets older and older throughout the season, I say it gets a little cranky because the stinging part of the plant, the little stingers seem to get harder and harder, and they really pack a punch when I hit on them with my skin and around them. So what is it? It's like a little hair. That's what they call it botanically. It's a little hair that sticks out of the nettle. And then what happens is when you come in contact with it, it kind of pokes your skin and breaks off. And it actually kind of looks like a little syringe under the microscope. And then there's this compound in there that gets injected into your skin and makes you itch. And it's a plant's way of saying, stay away, leave me alone, don't eat me. And usually it can deter some critters that way. But if you want to harvest it and be around it more, if you just realize that when those hairs are sticking out of the stem, on the stem here, here's little hairs, if you just kind of push up on them, push up on that hair, it kind of bends it and pops it, and then it comes off. So sometimes on the little stem, I'll just kind of push up and around those little hairs and pop them, and then I can bend it and snap it good. Now, if you're doing a very large harvest, that's not usually the way to go. I will put gloves on sometimes when I want to do a larger harvest, and I'll just hold it with my gloves and then cut it with my scissors or knife or whatever I'm using. So nettle is super, super nutritious, and it's very easy to find where I live anyways. So it's very cheap to get. So you have basically, kind of call it like the multivitamin of the plants, because it just has so many different minerals and vitamins available in it, and it's easy to find. So what do I do with it after I dry it? After I dry it, and it's easy to dry, just hang it upside down somewhere in a dry place within your home that's not too hot and humid, but it's cool enough, and so that it can dry nicely. If it's too hot, then the humidity will hang in the air and it won't dry as quick as it needs to be. And then what happens is sometimes those things kind of mildew a little bit, and it just a taste off. So super easy to find in my area. Usually it's found in lots and lots of places around the world, and it's easy to dry. So after I dry it, I will put it in some jars, like these kind of big jars back here, and it's dark green color, very beautiful looking dark green color. I like to make an infusion out of it where I take 1 ounce of the dried herb, pour over 4 cups of boiling water, and I let it sit overnight, or throughout the day. I might start it in the morning and then drink it towards the end of the day, or take some out and strain it a little bit for a cup here and there. It's got the flavor of like a spinach, kind of like that hearty flavor. It can be put in soups to add to the broth. You can do all sorts of things with that really strong infusion of it. If you make a tea and just let it steep for like 10 minutes, you really don't get much out of it. Try making a cup of tea with it for like letting it steep for 10 minutes, and then try making one where it steeps for 4 hours to 8 hours, and you'll see, I mean, the later steeping, the longer steeping one is just a dark green. It's kind of like this dark green back here, almost black looking sometimes. And then if you just steep it for like 10 minutes, you can actually see through the water, and it's very, very weak. So let it sit and infuse as long as you can. And then if you wanted to, you could even add the dried herb to soups, a soup that would be cooking for a long time, because those little pieces after they dry can be quite fibrous, especially if you got them towards the end of the year or even in the middle of the year. So they would need to be rehydrated pretty good, cooked down, or if you're doing like a soup that you use a blender to cream it up, that would be good too. That would be with the dried nettle. So frozen or fresh nettles can be frozen as well, so that you can blanch them, where you put them in boiling water real quick, like a few seconds, and then you take them out and you cool them down really quick, and then you get them into the freezer after you take off some of the water. Pat it dry a little bit if you can. So there's a number of different ways to use it. There's even nettle powder that you can purchase. I've purchased some from Mountain Rose Herbs in the past, and I've added it to other foods that I was making, like this. I make these little herbal bites or herbal balls, and put different powdered herbs in them, and then make like a treat out of them. So I also used stinging nettle tea to help me during my pregnancy, because I had low iron and low platelets and all that kind of thing, and I really wanted to support my system with that, and also used spinach and vitamin C to make it all work together to get that iron working well, because it needs vitamin C, and I had success doing that. So my numbers went up enough to be healthy, to have that baby healthy. So the other really helpful thing about nettle is that it's a natural antihistamine. So when I have spring allergies, I make sure that I'm drinking at least a half a cup in the morning of the strong nettle infusion, and it reduces my symptoms. I'm not the sneezy, itchy, runny nose type of symptoms I get from spring allergies. Now in the fall, I do get some fall allergies, and those are the worst for me. And I have to take a lot of nettle, like all day long, for it to help. And then there's nettle tinctures that are more concentrated to help with that too. So just something to consider, that if you use one of these herbs and they work, and then all of a sudden they don't work, it just could be that you need to increase the dose or try it in a stronger formula or something like that. So that's what I have experienced with stinging nettle and seasonal allergies from spring to fall. It changes. So yeah, so what else can I say about the nettle? It's a fun one to learn to harvest and dry, because like I said, it's usually readily available somewhere, and most people consider it a weed and want to get rid of it. And I just love nettle so much. When I first tried nettle, I thought I was going to poison myself, because I just thought, how can this be okay to drink? Aren't I going to get the sting in my throat? And so I just like took a sip of it and waited a whole day. And then you know, I met people who used it, and people would say, oh yeah, my grandmother used to, you know, harvest that in the spring, and we used to have nettle soup. So I just met more and more people who used it, and as I drank it, I just realized how nutritious it is, and just medicinal and edible that it is. And it's too bad more people don't use it, because like I said, it's easy to find, it's cheap, it's free basically, and it is just packed and loaded with nutrients that we really need. So Liz says that's funny. Yes, it was very early in my, when I got really serious about herbs. I've been studying herbs probably, you know, since I was most of my life. And, but you know, it was kind of like touch and go. And then when I finally started to really study and get serious about it, nettle was really my first kind of leap into the unknown. It felt like to try an herb that all my life I was told, you know, stinging nettle, it hurts so bad. And I experienced it as a child, what it felt like. And, you know, I just thought, how in the world could this be good for you? It stings. What in the world are we doing? But all the evidence and teachings that I got were like, you know, this is really good. Give it a try. So I learned to trust with nettle a little bit more. I learned to trust myself. And so one of the things I do now when I learn about a new herb is, and I want to try it, is I'll learn a lot about it from books, from teachings. I meet people who've used it, and I make remedies with it, and then eventually I'll get to a point where I feel ready to try it out, because I don't want to just jump into any herb that I've never used to try it. So those are some tips on how to get acquainted with an herb maybe that you're wanting to try. You'll know when you're ready to try it, when you've learned enough. There's some herbs that I'm still learning about that I haven't tried, and there's some herbs that have taken me a couple of years before I tried them, because I just really wanted to make sure that I knew as much as I could about it before I tried it or gave it to my family and suggested it to other people. So yeah, lots of things you can do with nettle: fresh, dried, powdered, tinctured, infusions. And I love it. I let it grow in my garden. It just, I never had to bring it to my garden. It popped up in one spot, and I let it be, and I let it grow where it wanted to grow. And then this year, or this last growing season, I actually had to prune it out. It was really taking over, and my kids were coming in crying, "Why do you have that plant in there? It stung me. I was playing in the garden and it stung me." So I kind of moved it out to make sure it wasn't in the pathways of where people walked, because it was starting to kind of go over to those pathways. I kind of redid my garden, and I brought it all to a center And so we'll see what happens this year, now that it's going to come up nice and fresh without having been chopped down like I did last year. And so there's I let some of it grow in my garden so that I can harvest it, and then if I want more, I'll go find other patches where it's just growing wild naturally. So I know some people who don't want it, and I can go harvest it from them. But yes, I do like it in my garden. It certainly makes me feel very witchy to have this painful plant in my garden. Not that I think witchiness is about painfulness and all that kind of stuff, but it's just fun to have, you know, different kinds of plants that are not just pretty looking, that, you know, have a bad reputation, but actually are really good. It's a really good learning opportunity. How do I work with it if it stings? So if I'm just going to harvest a little bit at a time, you know, a couple stalks of it, or in the springtime, it's really easy to work with. It doesn't have much sting to it because it's very pliable. It's very new. It's supple. The little stingers aren't really that pokey. So it's really easy to work with. And then I just make sure that I kind of go into an area and kind of push all those hairs down before I kind of try to work with it. And then if I'm going to harvest a lot, then I'll put some gloves on just so I can work a little bit faster and move around in there. Sometimes I just let it sting me because there's, you know, this idea that that sting actually helps with people who have like pain and arthritis. There's some belief in herbalism that that stinging sensation actually helps, and it helps to wake up the nerve system somehow and bring more blood to the surface. So sometimes if it just stings me, I just let it sting me because I know it's going to go away. If there's a particularly bad sting, like there's sometimes where the sting will last a good hour or so, and that's usually with the cranky ones at the end of the season in the fall when they're really, really tough. I'll put an ice pack on it to kind of help, you know, numb that area a little bit and take that pain away. That's what I do with kids if they ever come in contact with stinging nettle. If there's something really cold nearby or some cold water that they can put their feet in or their hand in or whatever part is affected, that usually helps to take that sting feeling away. I'll also take plantain leaves, Plantago major or whatever, Plantago lanceolate that's around here, but plantain leaves, and roll that leaf really vigorously in my hands to kind of break open the leaf and all the cells in there until it gets kind of mushy. And then I'll just rub that on the area too. That can help. So those are the things I do. The sting for me doesn't last too long usually, so I don't worry about it too long, but I worry about it too much. But when kids get into it, then yeah, anything cold helps. Putting the plantain leaf on them kind of helps them feel good about it too. And anything else that is for stings, if you have something over the counter that you want to use. Well, if you have any other questions, if you're watching this as a replay and have further questions about plantain, I mean, that too, nettle, have any stories about nettle, please do share them with us all. So thanks for joining in. I will be doing a live on Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time to wrap up the Plant Priestess exploration, and I'll have a wonderful offer for people who want to continue the journey with the Plant Priestess exploration. And so definitely join in for that so you can hear about that. So yeah, thanks for joining in. Take care. Bye-bye.